It's very hard to impress a South African with corruption because the numbers that we have seen, the amount of money looted and stolen over the last 10, 20 years are so big that frankly, they're unfathomable numbers. But earlier this week, the National Prosecuting Authority managed to get through a conviction and extract a plea deal from one of the key architects of the Steinhoff looting. And this is a huge deal. And the number, I have to say, really, really mind-blowing. Like Zimbabwe currency numbers. Andries Ben Grange, former CFO of Steinhoff, was convicted and pled guilty to doctoring, cooking an invoice to the value of, and I'm going to read this because 376,649,872 of your South African randellas. It is a massive conviction, and the fact that he has agreed to plead state witness is a huge deal. So let's talk about this conviction today on Weekend Special. Let's talk about how the National Prosecuting Authority may be starting to actually get through some of those convictions. My name is Dan Corder. South Africa is a movie. Welcome to the watch party. But first, a quick word from this week's sponsor. And I have to say that it is the luckiest, most wonderful feeling in the world when a brand wants to sponsor you and you happen to just actually love the brand. The iconic automatic swimming pool cleaning company Creepy Crawly turns 50 this year, and summer is coming. The most important part of a Creepy Crawly for me is that it's like the most fun part of children playing in the pool. I was having my Star Wars imagination time and I was swimming away from the Creepy Crawly because I was imagining it was some kind of Empire robot for a while. And they, this year, for this coming summer, have embraced the fact that the Creepy Crawly is so much more than a cleaning device. It's a part of children's joy and playtime lives, and they are now releasing customizable stickers that you can add to your Creepy Crawly to turn it visibly into more of a plaything and a children's companion for the joy of summer. So, Creepy Crawly turns 50, go get you one. Before we dig into Steinhoff and the NPA, thank you so much for your continuing support of our TV show, The Dan Corder Show on ENCA, and tomorrow night, friends, we have South African A-list musical superstar Lady Zamar coming. I'm so excited. Go to the description of this video. There's a Google form to fill out because coming to watch our show, it's absolutely free. So please join us tomorrow night, 9 p.m. DSTV 403, and check out Dan Corder in the Morning on all of your favorite streaming platforms. It's our every single weekday morning news podcast. Right. If you have been living under a rock the size of Brakpan, here's what you need to know about Steinhoff. Steinhoff started as a furniture company run by, amongst other people, Markus Jooste, South African company that rapidly, almost unbelievably exploded in value and took off and took over all over the world, buying major chains of furniture stores and other property assets in some of the biggest markets in the world. And Markus Jooste was seen as some kind of super genius. And then we found out it was all nonsense. Like the expansion was cooked, the numbers were cooked, they were making fake representations to investors in the world and extracting absurd sums of money from investors on nonsense balance sheets, fake transactions, holding companies, fake front companies, and it all came crashing down. But when Steinhoff crashed, it had a massive and awful effect on South Africa. The Public Investment Corporation, which is a government organization whose job it is to invest in South African businesses, they lost around 19 billion rand. Hundreds of thousands of South Africans lost their pensions. They lost their savings and their investments because of the Steinhoff collapse. The Steinhoff collapse hammered our economy. The Joburg Stock Exchange and everything on it went through an absolute disaster dip crisis because of the Steinhoff collapse. And ever since then, we've been trying to process the great disaster calamity of Steinhoff and the level of crime, the level of evil and fraud and law breaking that went on in that business. As you know, Markus Jooste is dead. And in the last year or so, the National Prosecuting Authority has been trying to secure convictions and get people involved in the Steinhoff leadership team to testify and provide information so that money can be got back, so that value can be returned to the state, and so that we can find out what actually happened with Steinhoff. And then last Thursday, we got some absolutely massive news, which is Andries Ben Grange, who was the CFO of Steinhoff, pleaded guilty to this staggering single cooked invoice, by the way. Like, I know I read that number, 376,649,872 rand, and you're thinking, Dan, that is so much money. This must have involved a lot of crimes, but all of that money, that 376 million, came from one cooked invoice. And I hope you now understand how much money was flowing around in Steinhoff. Apparently, Ben Grange, while he was CFO, was on a private plane with Markus Jooste a bunch of years ago. And Markus Jooste handed him a note saying, write up this invoice as though it's real to this value of money, because this is how we're going to move the money around amongst our various holdings. Even though that transaction did not exist, just make it look like it exists and we'll get this money transferred. One note. One cooked invoice leading to this. So Ben Grange has now pleaded guilty and gone into a plea deal to reduce the punishment, to reduce his sentence. He was initially going to get 15 years, but now it's been made 10 years, although effectively only 5 years with 5 years suspended, in exchange for Ben Grange agreeing to go on the record as a state witness for the National Prosecuting Authority, testifying fully and honestly and all the truths that he knows to give the NPA useful information to pursue other people. It's been met with some backlash. I mentioned to you how the PIC lost like 19 billion rand from the Steinhoff collapse, and the PIC wanted a far greater punishment against Ben Grange to like match the size of the evil that he did and the damage that his work did to the PIC's investments, which affect so many other South Africans' investments. And this is actually not the only successful guilty plea and conviction that the NPA has got in the last few weeks, because just a few weeks ago, tough name, Gerhardus Burger was arrested and pleaded guilty to insider trading. So if you don't know, just before Steinhoff was going to collapse, Markus Jooste sent what is known as the most expensive SMS in history to 4 people, urging them to sell all their shares, which Burger did. And that counts as insider trading. Because if you learn about a radical and sudden change in stock value as a shareholder of a company through somebody who is directly involved in and has influence over that value change, i.e. Markus Jooste, the CEO of Steinhoff, knowing that that crash was about to happen, that's called insider trading. It's illegal. And so Burger took out all of it and sold all of his shares. That is illegal. So in the last 2 weeks, he's pleaded guilty to 3 counts of insider trading, and he got 5 years in prison, so suspended for 5 years, which means he's not going to prison, but he's going to be like his testimony is on the record, which is great. All the money he earned from the sale of those shares is being given back to the state, back to the government, which is great. That's important. So these convictions are a really big deal for the Steinhoff investigation and for the country, but also for the National Prosecuting Authority, because the NPA is so important to the healthy functioning and running of a country. If you don't know, quick spot notes, the National Prosecuting Authority is the body that is supposed to go after the big criminals. They get information from the police and other sources, and then they do research, and they build dockets of evidence, and then they go to court against the really, really big, powerful people who would otherwise have enough money to get away with it. And one of the great crises of state capture was that the NPA was basically destroyed, because Jacob Zuma and his acolytes allegedly realized that the biggest threat to them was the National Prosecuting Authority, and so they sought to destroy it. Unfortunately, the way that the NPA is set up makes it vulnerable to a malevolent president, because the head of the NPA is selected at the personal discretion of the president. So if you've got a good president or a decent president or one who's not in trouble, that's fine. That's great. But if you've got a president who's seeking to loot and destroy the state, they can just change the head of the NPA to be one of their people. And that is exactly what Jacob Zuma allegedly did. Jacob Zuma put in one of his own people to be the head of the NPA and tasked that person with driving out all of the good prosecutors and replacing them with their own people, who then made no attempt to go after clearly red flag evidence against Zuma's people. The NPA in the state capture years was also had its funding cut, its resources stripped away. The development programs that the NPA has to turn new prosecutors into successful, effective, very powerful prosecutors was basically shambucked. And what that left us with was no NPA, which meant basically minimal legal ability to pursue cases against allegedly corrupt, bad folks. And the other problem with the NPA is that it is reliant on the Justice Department, which again, Justice Department of South Africa is headed by a justice minister who's selected at the discretion of the president. The Justice Department has influence over some NPA budgeting, some NPA resources, and some judges' appointments. And so the NPA was compromised and destroyed. And ever since President Ramaphosa came into power, what people in the know have been wanting is for the NPA to recover. Shamila Batoyi was made the head of the NPA, and she's got a lot of criticism in the last 5 years for not achieving a lot, which basically means that the NPA has not been able to secure high-profile convictions of particularly state capture. And that criticism, I get it, I understand it, but the wheels of justice move slowly, and even before those prosecutions can happen, the NPA needs to be recovered again. And Shamila Batoyi has had a lot of work to do. She's had to try and get funding back, resources back, recover the reputation of the NPA so that people actually want to work there. She's had to try and figure out who are the Zuma-era sleeper agents in the NPA and how to get rid of them and work through her own staff to make it an effective crime-fighting, prosecution-building force again. It's extremely hard to do. And maybe she hasn't done it well enough or quickly enough. That's up to you to decide based on whatever research that you do. But what's so exciting about these cases now, these Steinhoff cases, is look at the NPA securing these big, valuable convictions. The VBS ones, the Steinhoff ones. And slowly but surely, we're getting closer and closer to prosecutions around state capture. Ace Magashule, for example, is in a lot of trouble. He was Secretary General of the ANC, one of the most powerful positions in South Africa. Nosiviwe Mapisa-Nqakula was the Speaker of Parliament, one of the most powerful positions in our government, and she is still the person who's held the most powerful and high-ranking office in the country to then actually be arrested. Zizi Kodwa, powerful ANC recurrent minister, also being charged with corruption and is in court. And I know that these aren't necessarily the biggest convictions that we want yet, but this Ben Grange one is pretty massive. And slowly but surely, it feels like the NPA is getting back to a point where we are getting justice and we are getting convictions against people. And that's amazing. It's amazing for the NPA, it's amazing for the country, it's amazing for reinstilling belief in the National Prosecuting Authority and support for it, which is something that we as South Africans should care about as much as, if not more than the Springboks people. The NPA needs to be good. The NPA needs to be really good for a good functioning country. And the NPA still has a lot of challenges. It's currently fighting with the Justice Department, who very suspiciously, the Justice Department haven't given access to a large part of the Zondo Commission's research evidence base that they hold for the last 4 years, due to alleged technical glitches for 4 years. And that might just be, I'm just spitballing here, it might just be because a lot of the Zondo Commission evidence is against high-ranking ANC members. And the Justice Department is headed by ANC ministers. But that, that's just there for you to chew on. But I think that we need to all care very deeply about the NPA, and we can be cautiously excited about this stuff that is happening right now. Let me know what you think. Have a beautiful week. See you tomorrow night on ENCA, Ladies Amar, 9 p.m., as well as all the other good stuff at the Dan Quarter Show. Podcast Dan Quarter in the morning, Spotify, Apple, everywhere else, every weekday morning. And see you next weekend for the next episode of Weekend Special.